They thought she was just another helpless statistic. They thought her silence was weakness, and her poverty was a crime. Inside the polished walls of Courtroom 4B, Judge Harlan Whitaker didn't just deny Mrs. Hayes justice. He laughed in her face. He mocked her struggle while a greedy landlord smiled, thinking the eviction was a done deal. But they didn't notice the man sitting quietly in the back row, a man who wasn't there to beg for mercy, but to deliver a federal warrant. When the judge finally pushed too far, that quiet man stood up, and the laughter died instantly because the son of the woman they were tormenting wasn't just a spectator. He was the FBI, and he brought the receipts. The air in the Superior Court of fictional Oak Haven County smelled of floor wax and old fear. It was a smell Mrs. Kendra Hayes knew well, though she had spent years trying to avoid it. She sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded tightly over her worn leather purse, the one her late husband, Otis, had bought her for their anniversary. Her knuckles were ashen, contrasting sharply with the dark skin of her trembling hands. To her left sat Garrett Sloan. He was a man who wore cologne that cost more than Kendra's monthly grocery budget. He was checking his watch, tapping a manicured finger against the mahogany table, looking bored. He was the owner of Sloan Properties, a real estate conglomerate that had been slowly eating up the historic brooding neighborhood of East Oak Haven like a cancer. "All rise," the bailiff droned, his voice devoid of enthusiasm. The heavy oak door behind the bench swung open, and Judge Harlan Whitaker swept into the room. Whitaker was a man who looked like he had been born wearing robes. He had silver hair perfectly coiffed, a jawline that suggested expensive dentistry, and eyes that looked at the people in his courtroom not as citizens, but as inconveniences. "Be seated," Whitaker muttered, shuffling the docket in front of him. He didn't look up. Case number 492B, Sloan Properties versus Kendra Hayes. Eviction proceeding for non-payment and breach of lease. Let's make this quick. I have a tea time. Kendra felt a lump form in her throat. She tried to stand, her knees protesting with the ache of arthritis. "Your Honor, Sit down, Mrs. Hayes," Whitaker snapped, finally looking up over his reading glasses. His gaze was dismissive, scanning her Sunday best. A floral dress that had been washed a few too many times, and a matching hat that had seen better decades. "You will speak when you are spoken to. Mr. Sloan's counsel, proceed." Sloan's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Sterling, stood up. He didn't even bother to button his suit jacket. It was a display of arrogance. He knew this was a slaughter. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil. "The defendant, Mrs. Hayes, has failed to pay rent for the past 2 months. Furthermore, we have evidence of unsanitary conditions maintained in the unit that violate the lease agreement. We are asking for immediate eviction and damages in the amount of $4,000. Kendra gasped softly. "That's a lie," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Order," Whitaker said, though he didn't sound angry at her outburst. He sounded amused. "Mrs. Hayes, I will not warn you again. Emotional outbursts are for daytime television, not my courtroom." In the back row of the public gallery, a man sat alone. He was wearing a gray hoodie and jeans that looked like they had been bought at a thrift store. They would have noticed that his posture was too straight, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, and dangerously calm, never left Judge Whitaker's face. On the donors list for the policeman's ball every year. "It pains me to see you having to chase down scraps." Sloan stood, feigning humility. "Thank you, Judge Whitaker. It's difficult. We try to provide affordable housing, but when tenants take advantage of our kindness, well, It puts the whole business at risk." "Precisely." Whitaker nodded. He turned his gaze back to Kendra. It wasn't a look of judgment. It was a look of disgust. "Mrs. Hayes, you've heard the plaintiff. Do you have proof of payment?" Kendra stood up again, her hands shaking as she opened her purse. "Yes, Your Honor, I do. I have the receipts right here. I paid Mr. Sloan in cash, just like he asked. He came to my door on the 1st of every month. He said the online portal was broken. Your Honor, if I may, those are obviously 100% authentic. Your Honor, if I may, those are obviously fabricated. Mr. Sloan does not collect cash. It's against company policy. And that signature, anyone could have scratched that." Judge Whitaker didn't even ask to see the papers. He leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Cash, Mrs. Hayes, in this day and age. Do you expect me to believe that a woman of your background had $3,000 in cash lying around?" "I saved it," Kendra cried, her voice cracking. "I get my pension, and I clean houses on the weekends. I worked for that money." "Clean houses," Whitaker repeated, letting the words hang in the air like a bad smell. "I'm sure you do, but cleaning houses doesn't give you the right to squat in Mr. Sloan's property." "I'm not squatting. I've lived there for years. I raised my son there." "And where is this son?" Whitaker asked, looking around the courtroom theatrically. "Is he here to pay your bills, or is he like the rent money, entirely imaginary?" Laughter rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff smirked. Sloan covered his mouth to hide a grin. Kendra shrank down, looking smaller than ever. He's working, Your Honor. He's away." "Convenient," Whitaker scoffed. "Likely in a state facility, if I had to guess." In the back row, the man in the gray hoodie slowly folded his newspaper. He set it down on the bench beside him. His jaw muscles tightened, a rhythmic pulsing that betrayed the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. He unzipped his hoodie slightly. The humiliation was the point. Malik realized that now, this wasn't just about the apartment. It was a sport for them. "Your Honor," Kendra pleaded, tears finally spilling over, "please look at the receipts. Just look at them. Mr. Sloan signed them right on my kitchen table. He drank my sweet tea while he did it." "I don't drink tea, Mrs. Hayes." "I drink scotch," Sloan quipped from his table, drawing another chuckle from the lawyer. Judge Whitaker picked up his gavel, twirling it between his fingers. "Mrs. Hayes, let me explain how the law works since you seem to be struggling with the concept. The burden of proof is on the accuser. Yes, but in a civil matter regarding contracts, written digital records trump whatever scribbles you've brought today. You have no bank transfer records, no checks, just your word against a reputable businessman." "But he told me to pay cash," Kendra insisted. "He said he'd evict me if I didn't." "And now he's evicting you because you allegedly did," Whitaker said, bored. "It's a circular argument, and frankly, I'm dizzy. Judgment for the plaintiff." "No." Kendra grabbed the edge of the table. "Please, I have nowhere to go. My husband died in that bedroom. My memories are there. You can't just throw me on the street in winter." Whitaker's face hardened. The amusement was gone, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic malice. "I can, and I will. In fact, due to your disruptive behavior and your attempt to submit forged evidence. Yes, I am finding those receipts to be forged. I am granting the plaintiff's request for accelerated eviction. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." 24 hours, Kendra wailed. "But the law says 30 days. "The law says whatever I decide. It says in my courtroom when I declare an emergency nuisance," Whitaker snapped. "And you, Mrs. Hayes, are a nuisance. Sloan leaned over to his lawyer and whispered loud enough for Kendra to hear. Tell the renovation crew to be there first thing in the morning. We can gut the place by noon. Kendra slumped into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The sobbing was quiet, dignified, and utterly heartbreaking. It was the sound of a woman who had followed every rule, paid every dime, loved every neighbor, and was still being crushed by a boot she couldn't see. Judge Whitaker raised the gavel high. This court finds in favor of Sloan Properties. Damages of $4,000 are awarded. If not paid, a lien will be placed on any future assets. Case CCL. Objection. The word cut through the room like a gunshot. It was deep, resonant, and authoritative. Judge Whitaker froze, the gavel hovering in midair. He looked around, confused. The lawyer, Sterling, twisted in his seat. Sloan frowned. Who said that? Whitaker demanded. Counsel, did you speak? No, Your Honor, Sterling said, looking around. I did. Malik Hayes stood up in the back row. He didn't look like a vagrant anymore. He stood 6'3", his shoulders broad, his posture military-grade rigid. He began to walk down the center aisle, his heavy boots thudding against the carpet with a slow, ominous rhythm. And who? Whitaker laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. Are you the janitor? Sit down before I have you arrested for contempt. Malik didn't stop. He walked past the wooden gate that separated the public from the court. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Vance, stepped forward, his hand resting on his taser. Sir, you can't cross the bar, Vance warned. Back up. Malik stopped 10 feet from the bench. He looked at his mother. Kendra looked up, her tear-filled eyes widening in shock. Malik, she whispered. Baby, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in D.C. I'm here for you, Mama, Malik said softly. Then he turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Judge Whitaker. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by a glacial stare that made the judge's skin crawl. I asked you a question, Whitaker barked, trying to regain control. Who do you think you are, barging into my courtroom? You asked where her son was, Malik said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. You made a joke about state facilities. You laughed at her receipts. I will hold you in contempt, Whitaker screamed, slamming the gavel down. Bailiff, shackles now. Officer Vance lunged forward, grabbing Malik by the arm. Turn around, hands behind your back. Malik didn't flinch. He didn't struggle. With a fluid motion that was too fast for the old bailiff to track, Malik shrugged off the grip, reached into his hoodie, and pulled out a leather wallet. He flipped it open. The gold badge caught the overhead lights, blazing like a miniature sun. Next to it was an ID card with a holographic seal. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Malik Hayes, Financial Crimes and Public Corruption Division. Officer Vance, Malik said calmly, not even looking at the bailiff. If you touch me again, you will be charged with assaulting a federal agent. Step back. Vance froze. He looked at the badge, then at the judge, his face draining of color. He took 2 large steps backward, his hands raised. The courtroom fell into a silence so profound you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Sloan's smug smile had vanished. Sterling, the lawyer, was suddenly very interested in the papers inside his briefcase. Judge Whitaker stared at the badge. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Agent Hayes, he stammered. I didn't realize Mrs. Hayes had a relative in law enforcement. However, this is a local civil matter. You have no jurisdiction here. Malik smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just cornered a rabbit. Actually, Harlan, Malik said, dropping the honorific. I have jurisdiction everywhere federal laws are being broken. And you're right, this started as a local eviction, but it stopped being local the moment you accepted a bribe to fast-track it. A collective gasp went through the room. That is an outrageous accusation. Whitaker stood up, his face turning purple. I will have your badge. I know the director. Do you? Malik reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black digital recorder. He placed it on the defense table, right next to his mother's trembling hand. Because the director signed the warrant for this wiretap weeks ago. Malik pressed play. Static crackled, followed by a voice that was undeniably Garrett Sloane's. She's stubborn, Harlan. She's got receipts. She pays cash. Then the voice of Judge Whitaker, clear as a bell. Don't worry about the receipts, Garrett. I'll call them forgeries. Just make sure the consulting fee is in the Cayman account by Friday. $4,000 for the eviction. Same as usual. Done. Just get her out. I have a buyer for the land who wants to build condos. Malik pressed stop. The silence in the courtroom was shattered by the sound of Mrs. Kendra Hayes gasping for air. She looked from the recorder to the judge, her eyes wide with realization. Judge Whitaker slumped back into his chair. He looked small. He looked old. Malik leaned forward, resting his hands on the plaintiff's table, leaning into Sloane's personal space. You see, Mr. Sloane, you didn't just evict a tenant. You evicted the mother of the lead investigator on the RICO case building against your shell company. Malik turned back to the judge. Harlan Whitaker, get off the bench. You're sitting in the defendant's chair now. The command hung in the air. Get off the bench. For a heartbeat, Judge Harlan Whitaker sat paralyzed, his face a mask of crumbling arrogance. He looked at the bailiff, Officer Vance, desperate for salvation. But Vance had already holstered his taser and was standing with his back against the wall, eyes fixed on the floor, signaling complete neutrality. He had a pension to protect, and he wasn't going to lose it fighting the FBI for a crooked judge. You can't do this, Whitaker sputtered, his voice rising an octave. This is a courtroom. I am the law here. Not anymore, Malik said, his voice dropping to a gravelly low. He tapped an earpiece he was wearing. Move in. The double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a crash that made half the gallery jump. 6 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI swarmed into the room, followed closely by 2 state troopers. The synchronized sound of heavy boots on the hardwood floor sounded like a drum roll of doom for Garrett Sloane. Sloane, realizing the walls were closing in, made a frantic calculation. The exit behind the judge's bench was closer than the main doors. He shoved his lawyer, Sterling, hard into the defense table. Out of my way, Sloane screamed. As Sterling stumbled, sending briefcases and papers flying, Sloane scrambled over the railing, heading for the judge's private chambers. He's running, a woman in the gallery shouted. Malik didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply pivoted, extended his right leg, and kicked the heavy oak gate of the plaintiff's box, just as Sloane tried to vault over it. The gate swung shut with bone-jarring force, catching Sloane in the midsection. The real estate tycoon crumpled to the floor, wheezing, the wind knocked out of him. Before he could inhale, Malik was on top of him. He grabbed Sloane's expensive Italian silk suit by the collar and hauled him up, slamming him face first onto the table where just moments ago he had smirked at Kendra. Garrett Sloane, Malik recited, the Miranda rights flowing out like a lethal poem. You are under arrest for bribery, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit extortion, and RICO violations. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it. Click, click. The handcuffs were tight. Malik made sure of that. Meanwhile, 2 FBI agents had ascended the bench. Judge Whitaker stood up, his robes tangling around his legs. "Do not touch me!" Whitaker shrieked, batting at the agent's hands. "I have immunity. I am a sitting judge." "Immunity doesn't cover felony corruption caught on federal wiretaps, Your Honor," one of the agents said, spinning Whitaker around. They didn't treat him with the reverence the courtroom usually demanded. They treated him like a perp. They pulled his arms back, the black robes bunching up, stripping him of his dignity. As the cuffs locked onto Whitaker's wrists, the silence in the courtroom broke. It started as a murmur, then a ripple, and finally a roar. The people in the gallery, mostly poor residents of East Oakhaven, who had been terrorized by Sloan's evictions and Whitaker's gavel for years, erupted. "Take him down!" someone yelled. "Justice!" cried another. Malik hauled Sloan to his feet and handed him off to a uniformed trooper. Then he walked over to the bench where Whitaker was being led down the stairs in shackles. Malik blocked their path. Whitaker looked up at Malik, his eyes wet with terrified tears. "Agent Hayes, please, let's discuss this. I can help you. I know things. I can give you the mayor." "We'll get to the mayor, but right now there's something you need to do." Malik pointed to the defendant's table, to the small, trembling woman in the floral dress who was clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Apologize," Malik commanded. Whitaker blinked. "What?" "Apologize to my mother. Tell her you were wrong. Tell her she's not a nuisance." Whitaker looked at the agents holding him, then at the gallery recording everything on their phones, and finally at Kendra. The humiliation was total. I apologize, Mrs. Hayes," Whitaker mumbled, his head hanging low. "Louder!" Malik barked. "I apologize," Whitaker yelled, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. The eviction is void." Kendra stood up slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She walked over to the railing until she was just a foot away from the man who had tried to ruin her life. She looked at his handcuffs, then up at his tear-stained face. "I forgive you, Harlan," she said softly. The room went quiet. "Not because you deserve it, but because I won't let your hate live in my heart. But you make sure you tell God the truth when you meet him, because he don't take bribes." She turned her back on him. "Take him away, Malik." The chaos of the arrest had settled into the cold, clinical precision of evidence collection. The courtroom was now a crime scene. Agents were photographing the judge's bench, seizing laptops, and boxing up files. Malik sat in the witness box, which he had commandeered as a temporary command post. His mother sat nearby on a padded bench, sipping water brought to her by a respectful state trooper. In front of Malik sat Sterling, Sloan's lawyer. The arrogance was gone. His tie was undone, his face pale and slick with sweat. He wasn't in cuffs yet, a calculated move by Malik. "I'm just an attorney," Sterling stammered, his hands shaking as he held a bottle of water. "I represent my client's interests. I didn't know about the bribes. I thought the cash payments were consulting fees." Malik stared at him. He didn't blink. He let the silence stretch for 10 seconds, 20, 30. He watched Sterling squirm. "Sterling," Malik said finally, his voice dangerously calm. "I've been tracking Sloan for months. I know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. I know about the shell companies in Delaware. And I know that you are the signatory on the account that pays Judge Whitaker's mortgage." Sterling choked on his water. That's privileged information." "It's evidence," Malik corrected. "And right now, Garrett Sloan is in a holding cell downstairs. He's scared. He's soft. He's never spent a night in jail in his life. How long do you think it will take before he trades you to save himself? 5 minutes? 10. Malik checked his watch. He's been down there for 12 minutes. Sterling looked at the door, panic setting in. He told me to set up the accounts. I was just following orders. That didn't work at Nuremberg and it won't work in Oakhaven, Malik said. He leaned forward. Here is the situation. You are looking at 20 years for conspiracy and money laundering. You'll be disbarred, disgraced, and in federal prison. Sterling put his head in his hands. Oh, God. Unless, Malik said, sliding a notepad across the table, you give me the rest of the list. Sterling looked up. The list. Whitaker is a small fish, Malik said dismissively. Sloan is a wallet, but neither of them has the power to rezone the entire East Oakhaven district for commercial luxury condos without city council approval. They can't bypass the environmental studies without someone at the EPA looking the other way. I want the names, Sterling. All of them. Sterling hesitated. He looked at the FBI agents bustling around the room. He looked at Kendra, who was watching him with pity. If I talk, Sterling whispered, I'm a dead man. These people, they aren't just landlords, Agent Hayes. It's the syndicate. The Eastern European mob handles the construction contracts. They bury people in the foundations. Malik's eyes narrowed. This was the piece of the puzzle he had suspected, but couldn't prove. You give me the names, and I put you in witness protection. You walk out of here today, and Sterling the lawyer ceases to exist. You get to live. Sterling took a shaky breath. He picked up the pen. It's not just the council, Sterling said, his voice barely audible. It's the district attorney. That's why no one ever investigates the fires. The fires? Malik asked sharply. The properties that don't sell, Sterling admitted, writing a name on the pad. Or the tenants who don't leave. Sometimes accidents happen. Electrical fires, gas leaks, a space heater left on too long. Malik felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at his mother. If he hadn't come home today, if Kendra had refused to leave. Write it down, Malik commanded, his voice turning into steel. Every single name, every bribe, every fire. As Sterling wrote, Malik's phone buzzed. It was a text from the team searching Sloan's office. Found the safe. You need to see this. It's not money. Malik drove his mother home first. He wanted her out of the line of fire. You stay inside, Mama, Malik said, kissing her forehead as they stood on the porch of the humble apartment building that had started this whole war. Lock the deadbolt. Officer Ruiz is parked right outside. Don't open the door for anyone but me. Malik, Kendra said, gripping his arm. Her hands were still strong. You be careful. You poked the devil today. He's going to be mad. I'm counting on it, Malik said grimly. He drove to the Sloan Properties headquarters, a glass and steel monstrosity in the downtown financial district. The scene was chaotic. FBI agents were hauling out boxes of files. Office workers stood on the sidewalk, looking confused and terrified. Malik flashed his badge and ducked under the yellow tape. He took the elevator to the penthouse suite, Garrett Sloan's office. It was opulent, filled with modern art and leather furniture that cost more than Malik made in a year. In the center of the room, behind a massive painting that had been pulled off the wall, was a wall safe. The door had been drilled open. Agent Ramirez, a forensic accountant, was waiting for him. She was wearing blue latex gloves and holding a thick leather-bound book. We thought it would be cash or gold, Ramirez said, handing the book to Malik. But Sloan is old school. He kept a ledger, a hard copy, just in case he ever needed leverage. Malik opened the book. It wasn't just numbers. It was a diary of corruption. That day, 15,000, Judge Whitaker. Case dismissal 400. Another day, 50,000, Councilman Reeves. Rezoning approval, Sector 4. Malik flipped through the pages. The scale was staggering. Sloan wasn't just a slumlord. He was the banker for an entire ecosystem of graft. He was paying off building inspectors to ignore asbestos. He was paying police captains to slow-roll investigations into tenant complaints. And then Malik froze. On the last page, there was a scheduled payment for tomorrow. Payment, $250,000. The architect. Final clearance for Project Oakhaven Cleanse. The architect? Malik muttered. Who is the architect? We don't know, Ramirez said. But look at the note next to it. Malik squinted at the scribbled handwriting. Kendra Hayes obstacle removed. Demolition approved for that day. Malik slammed the book shut. They weren't just going to evict her. They were planning to demo the building 2 days after Christmas, whether she was fully moved out or not. They were going to bulldoze the entire block to make way for a casino. This payment, Malik said, pointing to the date, it's scheduled for tomorrow. A drop. We have Sloan in custody, Ramirez said. He can't make the drop. No, Malik said, a plan forming in his mind. He can't, but someone else can. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number for the federal prosecutor. We need Sloan to cooperate, Malik said into the phone as he paced the office. Offer him a deal. If he wears a wire and makes the drop to this architect, we take the death penalty off the table for the arson charges. There was a pause on the other end. Yes, Malik said. I said arson charges. Sterling gave us the fires. Sloan is looking at felony murder if he doesn't play ball. Make him understand that he has 1 hour to decide if he wants to die in prison or live in witness protection. Malik hung up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Oakhaven. Somewhere out there, the architect was waiting for his money, the person pulling the strings. Malik had a sinking feeling. The architect wasn't a mobster. Mobsters didn't clear entire neighborhoods with bureaucratic precision. Mobsters didn't use judges as pawns. The architect was someone inside the government, someone high up, someone who Kendra probably voted for. Pack it all up, Malik ordered, and get the tactical team ready. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. We're going to deliver a present. The winter wind whipped through the streets of Oakhaven, carrying with it the biting chill of a coming blizzard. It was Christmas Eve, the kind of night that usually promised warmth, family, and peace. But inside a nondescript plumbing van parked 3 blocks south of the Grand Oakhaven Hotel, there was no holiday cheer. There was only the low hum of hard drives, the smell of stale coffee, and the electric tension of a trap about to snap shut. Special Agent Malik Hayes sat hunched over a bank of high-definition monitors, his face illuminated by the ghostly blue glow of the screens. He pressed his headset tighter against his ears, filtering out the background noise of the tactical team checking their weapons behind him. "Sound check," Malik whispered, his voice barely a murmur. "Sloan, can you hear me? Tap your chest twice if you copy." On the center screen, a grainy black-and-white feed showed the interior of a luxury limousine. Garrett Sloan, the once arrogant real estate mogul, looked like a man being driven to his own execution. He was pale, his skin slick with a sheen of cold sweat that the camera picked up clearly. His hand moved sharply to his chest, tapping the lapel of his tuxedo twice. "Good," Malik said, his eyes scanning the biometric readouts on the side monitor. Sloan's heart rate was spiking, 120 beats per minute and climbing. Listen to me closely, Garrett. You are walking into the lion's den. You need to control your breathing. If you hyperventilate, he's going to know something is wrong. You are not a prisoner right now. You are a partner in crime. Act like it. I feel sick. Sloane's voice crackled through the earpiece, barely audible. What if he checks me? What if he has a jammer? He won't, Malik assured him, though his own hand rested near the trigger of his service weapon. Arrogance is his blind spot. He thinks he owns this city. He thinks you are his loyal dog. Just remember the script. We need the specific admission, arson, the demolition order, the intent to harm. Do not let him brush it off with vague metaphors. If he doesn't say the words, the deal is dead, and you die in prison. The limousine slowed to a halt. The feed showed the back entrance of the Grand Oakhaven Hotel. It was a towering structure of gold leaf and marble, the crown jewel of the city's skyline. Tonight, the ballroom hosted the mayor's winter charity gala, a black tie event where the city's elite patted themselves on the back for donating tax-deductible scraps to the poor. But the real business wasn't happening in the ballroom. It was happening in the penthouse. Showtime, Malik signaled to the tactical team. Alpha team, hold position in the stairwell. Bravo, secure the elevators. No one goes up or down without my say-so. Sloane exited the car, clutching a heavy leather briefcase with a white knuckle grip. Inside lay $250,000 in marked bills, bait for a shark that had been feeding on the city for a decade. Malik watched as Sloane navigated the service corridors. The hidden camera, button-sized and sewn into Sloane's lapel, swung wildly with his nervous gait. He passed security guards who simply nodded. They knew him. He was part of the inner circle. The elevator ride seemed to take an eternity. Malik watched the floor numbers tick up. 20, 30, 40, penthouse. Ding! The doors slid open, revealing a suite that was less a room and more a palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the snow-dusted city. A fire roared in a massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the Persian rugs. Standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, was a figure holding a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. He turned slowly. It was a face every citizen of Oakhaven knew, a face that smiled from billboards and campaign ads, a face that projected safety, progress, and trust. Mayor Preston Vance. The architect, Malik breathed, a cold fury settling in his gut. He had suspected it, but seeing the mayor standing there, waiting for a bribe to destroy his mother's home, made it personal in a way the law usually forbade. Garrett, Vance boomed, his voice smooth as velvet. He walked over, arms spread wide, exuding the casual confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. You're late. I was beginning to worry the snow had delayed our little Santa Claus run. Traffic, Sloane lied, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. The roads are a mess. It's brutal out there. It's winter, Vance laughed, taking a sip of his scotch. It's supposed to be brutal. That's why we sit up here. And they, he gestured vaguely to the streets below. Stay down there. Drink. No, Sloane said quickly. He set the briefcase on a low mahogany table. I want to get this done, Preston. My stomach is in knots. Vance raised an eyebrow, a flicker of annoyance crossing his polished features. You're always so anxious, Garrett. It's unbecoming. We are building the future. Anxiety is for people who can't afford vision. Vance walked to the table and unlatched the briefcase. He flipped the lid. Inside, the stacks of $100 bills sat in neat, crisp rows. A slow, greedy smile spread across the mayor's face. He ran a manicured hand over the money, almost caressing it. "Beautiful," Vance murmured. "This covers the final grease payment for the EPA clearance and the demolition crew. The contractors are ready to roll at dawn on the 26th. In the van, Malik leaned into the mic. "Push him, Sloan." "Now, about the 26th, Sloan stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. I'm worried about the building on 4th Street. The Hayes place." Vance didn't look up from the money. "What about it? The old woman? Kendra?" "She's still there." Judge Whitaker signed the eviction. "Sure, but she's stubborn. She's making noise. She has neighbors watching." Vance snapped the briefcase shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. He looked at Sloan with eyes that were suddenly cold and reptilian. "Garrett, why are we discussing this? The plan is in motion." "But if she refuses to leave," Sloan pressed, his voice rising in panic. "If the dozers show up and she's chained to the porch, it'll be a PR nightmare." "The news crews. There won't be any news crews," Vance interrupted, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. He walked over to the fireplace, staring into the flames. "Because there won't be a protest. Accidents happen in these old dilapidated tenements all the time, Garrett. You know that. It's a tragedy, really. Faulty wiring, a gas leak, a space heater left on too long." Malik's knuckles were white as he gripped the desk. "He's dancing around it. Get him to say it." "I need to know we're safe, Preston," Sloan said, his desperation making him bold. "I need to hear you say it. If she doesn't leave, are we really going to burn it down with her inside?" The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the weight of the sin being proposed. Vance turned around. He looked at Sloan with pure contempt. "You're soft, Garrett. That's your problem. You see a grandmother. I see an obstacle to a $300 million casino that will revitalize this city's economy. Yes, if she stays, she stays." The fire starts at 2 a.m. on the 26th. The fire marshal is already paid to delay the response by 15 minutes. That building is coming down, and anyone stupid enough to be inside it is simply collateral damage. Vance took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Now, are we done with the hysterics? Or do I need to find a partner who has the stomach for leadership?" In the van, Malik hit the record button one last time to save the file. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "We have it," Malik said, his voice turning into steel. "Conspiracy to commit capital murder, arson, racketeering. All units, go." Back in the penthouse, Vance poured himself another drink, unaware that his life was measured in seconds. To the future, Vance toasted, lifting his glass toward Sloan. Sloan didn't toast back. He took a step away from the table. "I'm sorry, Preston." Vance frowned. "What?" Boom! The heavy double doors of the penthouse didn't just open. They disintegrated. A battering ram smashed through the lock, sending wood splinters flying across the room like shrapnel. Before Vance could drop his glass, 2 flashbang grenades rolled across the marble floor, stopping at his feet. Bang! A blinding white light seared the room, followed by a concussive blast that rattled the windows. Vance screamed, clutching his ears, stumbling backward into the fireplace mantel. "Federal agents! Get on the ground now! Now! Now!" The room was suddenly swarming with black-clad figures. Laser sights cut through the smoke, dozens of red dots dancing on the mayor's chest. Vance, blinded and deafened, flailed his arms. "I am the mayor. Don't shoot. Do you know who I am?" Through the haze of smoke, a single figure walked calmly. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He moved with the terrifying precision of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Malik stepped over the debris, his FBI windbreakers stark against the chaos. He walked right up to the mayor, grabbed him by the expensive lapels of his tuxedo, and slammed him against the wall. Vance blinked, his vision clearing enough to see the man holding him. He saw the badge hanging from Malik's neck, and then he saw the face. The eyes. They were the same eyes that had looked up at him from the mugshot of a nuisance tenant named Kendra Hayes. "Agent Hayes," Malik said, his voice low and dangerous, cutting through the ringing in Vance's ears. "You wanted to talk about collateral damage." "This is a mistake," Vance shrieked, spit flying from his mouth. "I demand to call the governor. I demand my lawyer. You can't touch me. I am the architect of this city." Malik reached down, picked up the briefcase of cash, and dumped it upside down. The money cascaded over Vance's head, fluttering to the floor like expensive confetti. "You're not an architect," Malik growled. "You're just a thug in a tuxedo." Malik spun Vance around, twisting his arm behind his back, with enough force to make the mayor yelp in pain. The handcuffs clicked, a cold metallic sound that signaled the end of an era. "Preston Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, arson, wire fraud, and violating the RICO Act," Malik recited. He leaned close to Vance's ear. "And just so you know, that collateral damage you talked about, that's my mother, and she sends her regards." Malik shoved Vance toward the waiting tactical team. "Get this trash out of here." As they dragged the screaming mayor out of the penthouse, past the stunned Garrett Sloan, who sat weeping on the sofa, Malik walked over to the window. He looked down at the city. The snow was falling harder now, covering the streets in white. Far below, in the distance, he could see the faint lights of East Oakhaven. His mother was down there, safe. Malik keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Agent Hayes. The architect is in custody. The demolition is cancelled. Tell the fire marshal he's next." He turned back to the empty room, the fire still crackling in the hearth, casting light on the scattered money that was now just worthless paper. "Merry Christmas, Mama," he whispered. The trial of the Oakhaven syndicate was the most watched event in the state's history. It took months to prepare, but when the hammer finally fell, it fell with the weight of biblical judgment. Kendra Hayes didn't miss a single day. She sat in the front row, wearing her best Sunday hat, her head held high. She wasn't the defendant anymore. She was the witness. She was the survivor. The evidence was overwhelming. The wiretaps, the ledger, Sterling's testimony, and Sloan's plea deal painted a picture of corruption so deep it made the public sick. Judge Harlan Whitaker was the last to be sentenced. He stood before a new judge, a federal judge known for zero tolerance. Whitaker looked like a ghost. He had lost weight. His hair was unkempt. The arrogance that had defined him was completely gone, replaced by a trembling fear. "Harlan Whitaker," the federal judge read, "you were entrusted with the sacred duty of upholding the law. Instead, you sold it. You mocked the vulnerable. You weaponized your gavel against the poor." Whitaker wept openly. "I'm sorry," he blubbered. "I just want to go home." "Mrs. Hayes wanted to go home too," the judge replied sharply. "But you gave her 24 hours to vacate. I will be more generous." The judge paused, letting the silence build. "I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will forfeit all assets, pensions, and properties." The gavel banged. It was the loudest sound Whitaker had ever heard. As the marshals dragged Whitaker away, He looked toward the gallery. He locked eyes with Kendra. He looked for forgiveness from that sweet old woman who had offered him mercy in his own courtroom. But Kendra simply nodded, a slow, solemn acknowledgement of balance restored. She didn't smile. Justice wasn't a joke. Mayor Preston Vance received 30 years. Sloan, due to his cooperation, got 15. But the real victory wasn't in the prison sentences. It was in the restitution. The Department of Justice seized all of Sloan Properties' assets under civil forfeiture laws. The luxury condos, the hidden accounts, the land deeds, everything. Months after the sentencing, Malik drove his mother to a building downtown. It wasn't a court. It was the community center. "What are we doing here, baby?" Kendra asked. "Just come inside, Mama." Inside, the room was packed. Neighbors from East Oakhaven, tenants who had been threatened with eviction, families who had been ignored for years. When Kendra walked in, they stood up and cheered. Malik led her to the podium. He handed her a legal document. The government seized Sloan's holdings. Malik explained to the crowd. "Usually they auction it off, but I pulled some strings. I called in every favor I earned in D.C. We argued that since the properties were maintained with illegal funds and the tenants were victims of fraud, the buildings should be returned to the people." He looked at his mother. "This is the deed to your building, Mama, and the two next to it. It's a community land trust now. You own it, all of you. No more landlords, no more evictions. You run it." Kendra stared at the paper. Her hands shook, not from fear this time, but from joy. She looked out at the faces of her neighbors. Mr. Henderson from 2B, the young Sanchez family from 3C. She took the microphone. She didn't have a speech prepared. She didn't need one. "They thought we were weak," she said, her voice strong and clear. "They thought because we didn't have money, we didn't have power. They forgot that even the tallest tower starts in the dirt. And when you try to bury us, you forget that we are seeds." She looked at Malik, who was leaning against the wall, smiling his rare, quiet smile. "My son brought the badge," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But God brought the justice. And today, we are finally home." The following Christmas, the apartment on the second floor was warm and bright. The smell of Kendra's famous sweet potato pie filled the hallway. Malik sat at the table, no longer wearing a hoodie, but a comfortable sweater. He watched his mother laughing with the neighbors, serving food, looking years younger. He thought about Judge Whitaker sitting in a cold cell eating a tray of gray mush. He thought about the mayor, stripped of his power. Karma hadn't just hit back, it had knocked them out. Kendra walked over and placed a slice of pie in front of him. She kissed his cheek. "Eat up, Special Agent," she whispered. "You got work to do tomorrow. There's plenty more bad guys out there." Malik picked up his fork. "Yes, ma'am, but none of them are going to mess with you ever again." Kendra smiled, the smile of a woman who had won the war. "I know," she said. "Now eat your pie." They underestimated her poverty, and they ignored her son. That was their fatal mistake. Mrs. Hayes didn't just get her home back. She took down an entire empire of corruption because she raised a son who understood that a badge isn't for power, it's for protection. In a world where the little guy often gets crushed, sometimes, just sometimes, the gavel strikes the hand that holds it. Judge Whitaker learned the hard way that when you laugh at justice, justice eventually stops laughing with you. What do you think? Did the judge and the mayor get what they deserved, or was 25 years too light for ruining so many lives? Let me know in the comments below. If this story of justice satisfied your soul, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story where karma comes collecting. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next.